They said that government has great deference, it's called the Jacobson Rule, great deference when it comes to mandating like vaccines and when there's pandemics and things like this. Great deference. Well, this Supreme Court, in dealing with that, that principle in our case, the majority said, in essence, that Jacobson Rule, it's really not as strong as people say it is, because we don't ever believe the Constitution should ever be put on the shelf, even in times of disaster. Government, governors, etc., are always to be held under the scrutiny of the Constitution of the United States, no matter what. So that's the majority we have on the Supreme Court. I think there's a good chance that Supreme Court will apply that rule and scrutinize the facts and weigh the extent of the liberty violations versus the extent that there is a compelling state interest. It's not an absolute interest. It's a compelling state interest, health and safety, but they have to validate it and it has to be weighed. And I think in weighing this, as we've seen some judges already do, like the one in Chicago, Cook County, it's a county judge, so not the highest level. The county judge says, now this mandate, vaccine mandate, in weighing the risk versus the benefits here, the public interest versus the employee interest, I'm going to look at the employee interest here. Because the judge says, because if they have a vaccine that they don't want, and turns out later on it's deemed to be that they shouldn't have had to have it, it's irreversible. He says, so I'm putting a stay on this requirement for the vaccine. You go back to the negotiation table and try to work this through. So that mindset is there, and I think we have that mindset with the Supreme Court. We'll see. I mean, we have the best Supreme Court ever in my lifetime when it comes to religious freedom, parental rights, and the sanctity of human life. Sanctity of life, we're going to get a whole great talk on that, because I'm really excited about that. I think we're going to see coming down optimistic over there. So that's sort of where that's at. So as far as parents' rights issues, and if that does happen, that we end up getting this ultimate mandate regarding children, there's two possibilities. Well, there's three possibilities. One, parents will go ahead and have their kids vaccinated, even though they think it's not advisable. Two, they'll homeschool. Or three, they will leave the state. So how many of your parents right now whose children have not been vaxxed yet? Raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to do a little poll here. Okay. How many of you, if you have no choice, if you don't want to respond, you don't have to, you can just keep your hands down if you don't want to. Okay, so that's a privacy matter. Okay, that's fine. So just close your eyes and no one else will see it. I don't think that's going to work. Okay. So how many of you would say, if all comes to fail, I would go ahead and have my kid vaccinated because the other two options just aren't viable? Go ahead, raise your hand. Go ahead. That's what I thought. How many of you would go ahead and homeschool and stay in California, but probably homeschool? Raise your hand. Okay, already do. Okay. How many of you would say homeschooling is not the viable really option, and I would probably, for whatever reason, I would move out of the state and move to a free state? Raise your hand. Okay. Okay.
Your state.
Huh? Yeah. So Texas. I mean, I'm just telling you. Just know the weather is not the same. Okay. Yeah. The weather is not the same. By the way, do you know why Texans take their faith so seriously? I'm trying to figure this out. Why do Texans seem to be more faith than Californians? I think several reasons. Number one, in the winter, there's not much to do except go to church on Sundays. There's not much to do. It's cold, it's dry. And then in the springtime, you see these large green clouds overhead. You know what I'm talking about if you haven't been there. What do you mean, these dark, deep, black, green clouds? And you see them swirling like this. And those are potential follow clouds that can come down and suck them up, okay? At any moment. And they, just, you pray more when you're about to be maybe sucked up. Okay? And then in the summer, they're reminded where they go if they don't go to heaven. That's true. So, Texas, you don't want to think twice about Texas. In Florida, postcards look nice. If you go there, there's something called really sticky humidity. So, so if you're going to move out of state, just think it through, pray about it. I'm just saying, don't be too knee-jerk on that, in my opinion. But I do think there already have been a lot of people leave the state. And make sure you're leaving because you really feel you prayed about and saw God's direction on it. You don't want to leave out of compulsion or fear. And I see some people moving already way too prematurely as far as the vaccine mandate, way too prematurely, in my opinion. All right, so I'm going to open up for some questions now. And any questions at all? And I'm going to start with those in the front. And yes.
Well, I just want to say God bless you and God bless PJI. Yes. And,
Thank you. Your prayers are very much appreciated. And I don't say that, by the way, just tongue in cheek. Oh, your prayers are very good. No. I mean, your prayers are very much appreciated. I'll be honest, yeah. So,
my question is,
yeah, go ahead.
do you see any hope with these vaccine mandates coming down with religious exemptions as far as religious universities and schools are concerned?
Oh, religious universities? It's true, some of the religious universities, like Christian universities.
Will you repeat the question
yes.
so they can all hear?
He said, what about like religious universities, Christian universities? What about those that are requiring vaccine mandates? Oh. Okay, very good. Thank you. So what about those? And I'll tell you, I have a daughter, she's 17, she's a senior, and she's looking at what colleges to go to. And one thing she's looking at is she says, are they requiring the vax? Because if so, I'm not going there. She's just like her dad. Don't tell her that. That's a compliment at this stage. But she's she's got her conviction on that. And I will say two things. The universities that are the more Christian the university that I've noticed, the more likely they are not to be vax mandate. The more wishy-washy, like many Christian colleges.
Most.
Yeah, most. A lot of the farther you go away from the wishy-washy, woke, whatever thing, the more likely they are to be vax mandated. And that's what you're talking about, is some of those that are good schools, but they're not maybe as solid in that regard, but they're excellent schools that you still might want to attend and be a salt and light, or to benefit from a special program. They have their freedom to put pretty much what they want to require. However, let me say this: Indiana University case was a case involving some students who filed a lawsuit and says, we don't want to be vaxxed, we shouldn't have to be vaxxed, and the court ruled in favor of the university. It says, no, they're requiring it, you have to accept it. And maybe you'll look at that and say, oh, this is terrible. Well, it is terrible, it's not as bad as you think, because what the court noted, though, is that the university allowed for religious exemptions. But these college students said, no, we don't think you should have to have religious exemptions. And I'd say 99% of the people who've heard about that case don't know that really critical, important fact. The fact is, universities, including Christian universities, generally will accept a religious exemption, but you need to follow the same pattern that I talked about earlier. Is there a Christian university that you know that's not allowing any religious exemption at this point?
Not that I'm aware of, but I was just wondering if you see the mandates coming down and Christian universities being in a tricky spot because of that.
Yeah, I don't think at this point the universities, private Christian universities, are going to be compelled to require, unless it's, well, I take this back, by the state can come out with mandates. That's another reason why my daughter is looking at a lot of schools outside of California, because California is more at risk of that potentially happening. But that's speculation. It's speculative. I mean, if there was a school like, let's say there was just, I'll just think of one, Masters University. Okay. See, I know my audience. Okay. If I really want to go there, I'd go there. Especially Masters, because they'll be probably the last Christian college in California or West Coast Christian college, probably another one, be the last one to get into that. So I wouldn't let that keep you from going to a school, but that is it's partially also depending on the state. Anyway, next question. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think about the
Wait.
vaccination?
Oh, sorry.
The CDC talking about that pill that they're coming up with.
The antiviral pill?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. The antiviral pill, that's for treating people who have COVID. Yeah, I'm really actually very frustrated because Kaiser, when I had COVID, I had it really bad in March. I had a fever for 13 days, and then I had pulmonary pneumonia, viral pneumonia. And they just said, well, why don't you come in and be tested? I said, well, great, is there any viral medics? She goes, well, no, but I said, so for your records, you just want to know whether I have it? You want me in a very sick, ill position to come? I was really frustrated. So you have institutions like Kaiser that sometimes have been very irresponsible, in my opinion. Okay, thank you. We're suing another case for a nurse, by the way, that was discriminated against because she said she had to do the abortions in order to work in the women's clinic. Yeah, oh yeah, it's a great lawsuit. So anyway, I'm sorry, so you're forgetting about the pill. So the good news though is that the antiviral medications are becoming more established, they're more recognized. Japan is using the one, thank you, ivermectin, it's just been wiped it out. So I think that that's going to become more institutionalized, early usage, early that. Dr. McAuliffe from Baylor Medical has a coronary. I mean, he just is emphatic. He says it's a basic protocol. You get it early on. He has not lost a single patient. So yeah, I think we're going to see more of that. And yes, ma'am.
Can you just clear up something for me,
Yes.
legal-wise? All these mandates, they are effectively being treated as laws. Is that not unconstitutional?
Yeah, I know. So
They're
here's,
not going through the regular channels. Why are we even giving them credence?
I know. Good question. So you can have laws passed by the legislature, state legislature, or Congress, or you can have board of supervisors can pass ordinances. But you also have mandates, which can have the effect of law, but the mandates have to be within the scope of the authority of that entity or politician or political figure like a governor in order to do it. So the question that comes into play is specifically with the mandate, does that elected official have that authority for that mandate? If Governor Gavin Newsom issued a mandate saying that everyone with blue eyes are hereby are guilty of a fourth degree felony. Third degree felony shall be locked up for 7 days. He doesn't have that authority. There's no statutory authority with regard to his scope. So that would be an invalid mandate, and that would be struck down. But so the mandate regarding vaccinations being added to the list and being mandated in that regard, the courts recognize, for the sake of other questions, I'll say, the courts recognize that as a valid use of power. It can be challenged as unconstitutional in terms of its application relative to is there a rational basis, is it really compelling state interest, is it being narrowly tailored? But that's a separate question from whether or not the governor has the authority to issue it to start with, and then you can scrutinize it constitutionally. Next question. Is yes, ma'am. The Kaiser person.
Yeah, I mean,
Obviously going to be reaching out to your organization privately for my situation, but the whole way that you described how to do the religious exemption, I guess I didn't realize I could have just actually written something and submitted it, because the way it came down back in early August was, there's these two questions you have to answer. What is your religion? What is your faith? And then secondly, can you back up why you're declining it and cite some scripture? So those two little things, boom, send it on its way. They kick it around for a while and they send you a follow-up email. Well, you need to answer this question. Have you ever had any other vaccines? Have you declined other vaccines? And I responded, yes, I declined the flu vaccine. You have it in my personal file. You let me sign a personal belief religious exemption for my flu vaccine every year. what's your alcohol use history, what's your all personal health information, what medications have you taken, and then finally, because we approved the religious exemption on, what's the word that you forgot, but for now, we approved it. And then 2 weeks later, after further consideration, we don't believe you. So, how are they,
You didn't, yeah.
entity allowed to say they don't believe me?
Have you been terminated already?
I was on unpaid leave,
Are you still on unpaid leave?
up until next Monday.
Okay, we can talk, but I would recommend you to go ahead and prepare that elaborative, because you're actually not terminated yet. So therefore, you're still under, you're still employed, so I would go ahead and prepare that, what I talked about, and I would get that sent to them ASAP. Yeah, very good. Hey, you're in it's terrible. It's terrible. You have a lot of people who are very intolerant towards people of faith, and it's like this demonic things coming out, and they're being very hostile, unreasonable. It's like almost a mindset that they want to purge people of faith. Now let me just say one thing though. Does God see that? Yeah. Does that take him off guard? No. When Jesus was crucified, I bet Satan was just going, yeah, we got him. We got the Son of God, boom, out of the picture. That was all. God knew what was going to happen here in the big picture. Now, is he trying to purge people of faith out of California because of the huge earthquake that's about to hit? I'm just saying. I live in Texas, in which earthquake contest, so I'm just saying. But we don't know, but I just want to sort of keep that in the big picture. That, but your situation, that's what I would do. Okay. Next question. Yes, you with the that race car driver, Brandon.
You say
I
it
love
earlier.
Brandon, that race car driver.
Yeah, for NASCAR. You stated earlier that you are making progress on lawsuits for getting the jab under mandatory conditions from an employer. Personally, I think it's more of an assault. You're physically harming somebody intentionally, and Big Pharma was exempted from all liabilities.
Right, right.
But can an entity other than Big Pharma, like state, county, city, private employer, be held liable for those damages?
Yes.
Outside of workers' comp.
Yes, potentially. Potentially. That's a separate issue. We're not there yet. As far as for damages in that regard, but workers' comp is definitely. Yeah, to some degree. Well, it's a heavy question, and I don't want to bore the audience with
It's a lot of fear.
with whether there's the means and the level of foreknowledge, with the intentional neglect or negligence. Yeah. But possibly, I would say possibly. Move on. Yeah.
Right now, the vaccinated must get vaccinated to protect the vaccinated.
4 times.
Yeah, don't think about it. It won't make sense. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, the next question. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your time. So I know we all have our crazy conspiracies as to why this is being so forced onto us, but what do you feel? Why do you feel this is being forced onto us as well as children?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big conspiracy person. Like, for example, I don't believe that there's a microchip in the vaccines. We have the capacity for that, but it's not happening. I see the streaks of cloud in the sky until I have evidence. I'm not going to say those are dangerous. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, show me the facts and the statistics where we're at. So my speculation, this is just totally speculative, I'm thinking maybe the reason that Dr. Fauci and all of them at this stage are so emphatic about everyone being vaccinated who don't need to be vaccinated, who understand it, maybe there's a financial incentive, possibly. We know that he has a financial interest in these pharmaceutical companies. There was actually more than 30 new billionaires created because of the pandemic. That's a lot of, shift in capital and wealth. So maybe there's a financial interest in that regard. Maybe also there's the fear and concern that at the end of the day, 5 years, 10 years from now, that they know there's a substantial risk that there could be some serious long-term ramifications. So very emeritus doctors, like from Harvard Medical School, Harvard, epidemiologist, I can never pronounce that. Can someone say it right? Yes, what she just said. Yeah, so, you know, what do you call viral doctors? Yeah, so he's just emphatic. He says this is going to have serious long-term ramifications. Well, he's not a nobody. I mean, Dr. McCullough, there's a lot of highly respected, intelligent, very sharp, professionals, and they're snuffed out on the media networks, the big tech. Why? So I'm thinking one reason might be that they're pushing to have everyone vaccinated, because if everyone's vaccinated, and then we have a sharp uptick in cancer or infertility, or there's already some anecdotal studies showing concern on fertility issues. Anecdotal, but it's still worth looking at. Then if everyone has it, then they can't point the finger and say that's the reason. Another scenario that I'm concerned about long term, since you opened that up, I'm going to go ahead and mention it. This could also open a door in the long run for a lot of persecution of people of faith, in particular those who've been more vaccinated. Here's why. Let's say 5 years from now, it's discovered that it has serious, say, fertility issues. And people who were vaccinated, multiple boosters, a lot of them are having a hard time having kids. And 2 doors down, they know there's a Christian family with their 5th child they just had. And there's going to be a lot of anger. They sacrificed for the betterment of America. And these selfish Christians, and they have children. And I can just see, that's just one aspect of possible persecution. Is God going to be glorified? Yeah, you bet. God is glorified when we as Christians stand up for Him and face persecution. If you want a good sermon on that, somebody gave a really great sermon on that. It was me this morning, so. You can get that. Can we get it online? Okay. Which gives you a good perspective, I think, in the big picture. So, but there's other speculations and all. As far as did the Chinese develop this intentionally to da-da-da? There's no evidence that I've seen to say they intentionally did this. We know that they engineered it. This is man-made. But for it being man-made, I would not have had a fever for 13 days. And so I look at the facts, and I try not to go too far beyond those, but it is a good question because it's not logical. So you try to think through what are the incentives, what's the motivation, what's behind this. So let's say I'll do you, and then I'll go to the other side. Yes.
Just kind of going back at the school-age kids, one of my concerns, if we are able to use the religious or the personal beliefs.
Exemption, yeah.
My kids have been fully immunized to date.
Mm-hmm.
Will that be something that affects my ability to grab an exemption for this one?
No, it won't. Because it's a personal belief about this vaccine. So, yeah, in fact, they've been vaccinated and a lot of other things. That's fine. Oh, I want to make sure I remember to mention this too. Actually, we have one more question on this side, and we'll shift to this side. The lady there in the back, she's raised her hand. But while she's getting the mic, for some of you who are in a dire situation, like you're told January 4th, and you've already applied and you've been denied, a couple things. We have on our website what to do if you're denied. We've already spelled all that out on how to prep the EEOC complaints. We had to, because we just had hundreds of thousands coming to us, so we had to streamline this. But in addition, you might want to negotiate and say, look, you know what? Hey, I understand I was denied, and you have concerns because this is a medical position, and you think because I'm dealing with people in ICU, and maybe there's certain circumstances that they're justifying this unequal treatment, unfair treatment. You can't say, you know what, hey, I'm not against all vaccines, and I understand that Novavax is coming out with one. That's a traditional vaccine, and I've prayed about it, And I really, maybe you want to pray about it, so don't take my word for it. I'm not saying, thus saith the Lord, this is what God wants, okay? Because that's very dangerous. Biblically, some bad things happen to people who do that aren't supposed to. But pray about it, see God's direction. If you feel like the Novavax vaccine, which is a traditional vaccine, it doesn't cause blood clots, has a 91 efficacy rate, and doesn't mess with your RNA or your DNA, it's the same as a flu vaccine type. They take a dead piece and that kind of concept. This is what I've read. I'm not an expert. I would look into that. You might be able to say, if you do a religious exemption, to say, I have no difficulty with the Novavax. It's supposed to come out in the first quarter of next year. I would really appreciate this accommodation. I mean, it just adds more. The more reasonable you are, the weaker position that they have for wrongful termination. They're more in trouble. And they may say, oh, okay, so you're not a crazy anti-vaxxer. You prefer, yeah, we'll work with you. You know, and some people don't like it when I say that, especially if they're anti-vaxxers. They've gotten all over you on Zoom calls for even mentioning Novavax. Or Relife is another one that's pending, BRILIFE. That's another traditional vaccine.
If it was for our health, they would open the borders.
Huh?
If it was, all this is for our health, and we're talking about, then we should close the borders.
Oh, they should close the borders because it's all about health.
That makes a lot of
I
sense.
know, yes, I agree, 100%. So, anyway, so those are something you also might want to use as a tool, okay? In your chest there, your situation. Yes, okay, we'll start here, we'll go back. Yes, ma'am. Oh, wait, back there, go ahead.
Just really quickly about the children again. So recently I saw floating around language from the World Health Organization's website regarding consent and assent. Language for healthcare workers and school administrators, encouraging the use of language in waivers to say that a parent, by signing that waiver, consents their child being given vaccination on school grounds. I don't know if you've heard of this anywhere else, but there's a case in Louisiana where a student was vaccinated without parental consent. So what can we do as parents to protect our children, as in our school system, our school administrators already announced that they're going to start having clinics for children after school hours and on weekends, so they're not near that potentially happening. But what is the concern, seeing this language, hearing these examples of it happening, where they could potentially vaccinate our kids and say, oh, well, your child being at school is consent, and how do we prevent that?
Yeah, I would say the personal belief exemption request in writing, that on its face, statutorily, is sufficient and should be sufficient. Schools that violate that are opening themselves up for lawsuits, particularly if there's any danger to the child. So that's all I can say on that. But otherwise, I haven't heard about it. Please, if you have any information with you, let me know. So we'll pass it on to our attorney. I get some great information sometimes from people who aren't lawyers all the time. So I soak that in. Yeah. And also, one thing too, also about the COVID-19, obviously we got those who've had the virus. We have also on our website, you'll go through the resources, we have an index of not just 13 studies, there was just 13 that said those who've had COVID have a stronger and broader immunity. It's now up to 91. We have an index on our website, so when you file for your health and medical exemption, or even if you have it with your regular religious exemption, I would attach that as well. Pretty good, compelling. There's 91 studies saying it's stronger than the vaccine. 91. In fact, every study except there's one doctor who has yet to come out. Dr. Fauci, that's it. We'll have to wait for him. Anyway, all right, next one. Yes, ma'am. He's gonna go around this way. This is good jog and everything too. Appreciate that.
Good evening. Because the aborted fetal cells have been used in development of the vaccines, is that a relevant excuse for religious exemptions? You know,
Yes.
cite Psalm 139. And,
Oh, yeah, yes.
You know, we don't
Yes.
want to use anything that would harm life.
Yes, that is a valid religious exemption conviction, and you want to spell that out. But you don't want to say, because there's aborted fetal tissue in the vaccine, There isn't. It's used rather for the production of the testing. But it's a strand that goes back, I think, over 40 years, from an abortion over 40 years ago. So, and they've tried to come back and say, but don't let that be your only one argument, because their rebuttal is, well, wait a minute, haven't you had Tylenol before? And these other things, they had Pepto-Bismol. How can they say Pepto-Bismol as a part of the virus? That existed in the 1930s. Before you knew it, strains, you know. So, lawyers were behind that, I think, too. So, but you know, so don't have that as your only argument, but that is definitely a credible argument to have. And oh, do you? Okay. Good. What's that?
I have the silencing and I have a positive antibody test and a religious exemption.
Okay, she uses that for stores, a positive antibody test and the religious exemption. And she got that from us. Yeah, and you get it in the stores. Yes, for consumers. Yes, that's something that we. Yeah, very good. That's on our website, pji.org. I'm telling you, I told my staff, they said, "Oh, we're overwhelmed." I said, "Okay, let's regroup. Let's put it all out." We even have a Q&A, 28-page Q&A, in addition to the other information on our website, pji.org. There's no fee, there's no Amway presentation in that. I mean, there's no bait and switch, okay? So I want you to know that. Yes. By the way, if you're at the family, thank you. I offended someone once when I said that. They've got great vitamins, okay? Yes, ma'am. Or are we over here now? Or? Okay, very good.
Just a word about the vaccine reporting system. Anyone can report an adverse effect, both physicians and lay people, and none of the reports are documented as to whether they're true or not. So if you get the vaccine and get a rectal itch, you can report to them that you had a rectal itch, and it will be reported as an adverse effect. And you mentioned that there were 17,000 deaths, and I presume that's from the 3 vaccines. I looked up on the system as well, just for the Pfizer vaccine, and I found 3,800 deaths, if I was using the system correctly, because as a beginner to that, it's not very user-friendly and very easy to use. But the point is, and I presume that most of these deaths occurred in people who are elderly. Well, as we all know, elderly people, in fact, people of all ages, particularly elderly people, die every day. So if that was the day that Hashem, that God had said that you were going to die, and you were going to die at 12 noon, but you happened to get the vaccine at 10 o'clock in the morning, then conceivably somebody could say, well, you know, you died of the vaccine. Now, certainly, people can die of an anaphylactic reaction. In fact, I believe there are 8 people in the United States that die every year of an anaphylactic reaction from aspirin, for example. Okay. But one would have expected by now, if there's truly deaths, and by no means there are side effects, adverse effects. I know personally of one individual, a 35-year-old woman who had a severe adverse effect from it.
No speeches, but go ahead.
So my point is I think we have to be very careful in stating how many people have actually died from the vaccine directly, because I don't think anybody really knows.
Okay. Where are you from, by the way? Are you a doctor?
I'm happily retired.
Oh, happily retired? Okay. All right, I don't know if you're a doctor or not. But my research came from the VAER, and that is what the citation shows, over 16,000 deaths attributed. Similarly, those, as we also noticed, that, as I mentioned before, more than 4 out of 5 of those who have reportedly died from COVID, more than 4 out of 5 of them had serious pre-existing conditions like cancer, enlarged hearts, and other circumstances. Now, why would that happen? We know there's not a financial incentive for people to have false reports of why they died. There's no financial incentive for that at all. We do know that there's a significant financial incentive to report people for dying of COVID. That is more than doubling of the financial reimbursement. In the hospital, exactly. So on once, when we try to scrutinize the credibility, for me, and I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a good. We need to think. We need to be thinkers, and so you promoted thinking. I appreciate that. But one thing we need to do as an attorney, look at evidence, what are the incentives for false representation? On one hand, I see very little incentives for false representation, for wrongful, for death, or for serious long-term ramifications. I see a heavy financial incentive for the other. That said, also, just to show you some information, on one hand, my own sister, she died 2 months ago of COVID. She was a missionary down in Belize with her husband. She's going to Bible school down there. She refused the vaccine. She had many underlying health conditions. She was about 60, 61 years old. For her, it might have made good sense to have had the vaccine, looking in hindsight. On the flip side, I personally know of a 27-year-old, strong, healthy male required to get the jab to work. Shortly after getting it, his nose started bleeding. It wouldn't stop. He went to the doctors. They admitted him. Less than 2 weeks later in the hospital, he's dead. These are two people that I personally know of with real ramifications. So I'm not one of these people that says, this is all bogus, that's all bogus. We have to, this is where freedom is most important, where the stakes are the highest.
That's right.
And that's why that's the position we're taking. And we do need to all think. I'm glad you're a thinker, and I think that's something I encourage us all to do. So thank you very much for pointing that out.